So actually Maya looks very complicated, but it really isn't, okay? At least for the interface, it isn't. So it's being divided into top, bottom, left, right, and center. So the top here is what we call your menu sets, okay, or your menus. So we have your usual like menus that you're already familiar with, right? Your Photoshop and stuff like that. And we've got a couple of buttons which honestly I hardly use except for here. And this is like near the end then I use it. And for games, right, you don't even use it. Okay, so only these buttons. The rest are like save and all that, I will go by the menu. And below here, the tabs is what we call the shelf. So these are like different buttons containing shortcuts to different functions or tools that you use in Maya. And like what I say, right, Maya's strength is in customization. So you can actually create your own shelf and create your own buttons, your own shortcut keys that you use very often. So depending on what department you are specializing in, that's the shelf that you have. You can save it out and bring it with you into any company that you use, you know, that kind of thing. Provided your company allow you to plug your thumb drive, right? So otherwise you can just kind of bring this over. Okay, so that is for the top, mainly your menus. And on the bottom here, this is your timeline. So this is mainly used for animation. So at this point in time, for assignment 1, we're not animating anything, we're just creating and painting. Okay, so we don't have to look at these in detail. Now on the middle portion, the left hand side, this is called the toolbox. This is where we select stuff, move, rotate, and scale. Okay, so we will use that a lot, but usually it's accessed through shortcut key. Okay, so I don't usually go and press things here. But at the bottom, this is where we will go to quite often. Now these are the different layouts that you have for your panel. So your panel is the center part of your window where you can, it's your canvas, alright, you can model and animate stuff here. So the first button is the perspective view, the 3D view. The second button is, so you can go ahead and press, okay, don't be afraid to like break the software. Okay, so the first one is perspective, the second one is a 4-view mode. So we have the perspective there, alright, we still have, we also have the top, front and side views. These are 2D views. So you can actually put a reference image here and copy it and so-called trace over in 3D, alright, and yeah, basically you can't rotate, okay, you can only look at it and sort of like zoom in and out and move it around, that's about it. Okay, the third button here, this one I hardly use, this is just 2 panels. Means you can customize, it's just 2 sides, left and right, okay, you can customize what you want here, which I find is useful for a later stage when you are doing painting. Okay, for now, perspective and 4-view, that is like enough. Okay, the last one, the 4th button, this is useful. This is called the outliner. The outliner lists all the objects in your scene. So if you want to rename stuff, you want to group stuff, you want to find something, it's all here. Okay, and the default. When you see the default, you already have 4 cameras. Please don't delete any of them, okay? You need all of them. You have your default light and object set. So these are already present in your empty scene that you have to keep. Okay, so that is it for the toolbox on the left. So obviously we're at the center, right, which is your panels. And let's look at the, oh yeah, by the way, in a 4-panel view, if you want full screen for each of the panel, you can just mouse over the panel and tap spacebar. Okay, and you tap spacebar again, it will go back to 4-view. So you can kind of just quickly pop in and out of different views to look at stuff. And if you hold your spacebar, right, you notice there's a flicker when you tap, isn't it? This is not an error. This is something called a hot box, and this hot box contains all the menus in Maya, so you don't have to like go up and select. You can use hot box. In fact, the 4 quadrants here, if you right click, there's additional stuff even in the middle. It's a very complex thing, which means, right, it allows you to fully work with just full screen. Full screen means full screen means something like that without anything at the top, bottom, and all this. Oh, actually, I think I can hide. Okay, hide. Show. Oh no, I just plucked out everything and can't find how to. Okay, now you can hide all elements, so you get like very clean, big space that you can work from directly from your hot box. Or obviously, as beginners, right, we will just use the regular UIs. Right, okay, how you get back your workspace, right, if you're being an idiot like me just now and start to peel up everything. Okay, you can actually go to your workspace in your top right hand corner, and you can reset current workspace. Yeah, that's how you get back all your stuff. Okay, so of course you can go to your modeling, your expert. Oh yeah, you could have just click expert and okay, anyway. Yeah, so that's how you get back your workspace. Now let's look at the right hand side. So the right hand side over here, this is your channel box. Alright, and this contains position, rotation, and scale information. So let's say I create a cube, right? And I want to scale it. You can see my scale increases. I can move it, and it records the space in time. Okay, so this is mainly used for basic like moving things, positioning things, and it's also for animators. Okay, animators use the channel box a lot because all these channels can be animated. Alright, and this is the place that animators go. Now if we look at the bottom here, inputs, this is important, okay? This contains history. You know, it's like your Photoshop history. So as you do more and more stuff, it's going to have more and more layers to it. So you can actually edit the settings in your history. For example, you can include more lines if you need to. So don't worry about that. We will talk about it again once we start modeling. So at the bottom here are display and animation layers, which is meant for grouping, for display. Okay, you are grouping things together in this place. And for animation, is meant to blend animation layers together. So we're not really going to use this part at all. Now, where to get your channel box is basically in your top right hand corner. You see this row of buttons here. So your channel box is in this layered looking button. Okay. Another thing that we will touch on just a little bit is the attribute editor, the third button. This one contains all the settings you will find for your object, everything. So the channel box is just the basic position, rotation, and scale. For attribute editor is every single thing, including your history. So the more stuff you do to your cube, right, the more tabs you're gonna have. Okay, so those are all history. So like what I said, animation Maya is a superior animation program. So everything you see here can be animated, including the color. Alright, so that's very cool, including transparency, including reflection. So that's why it's so strong. Okay, so now let's go to our scene. And the very first thing I want you to learn is to rotate your scene, to move your camera, and to zoom in. So how you do that? If you hold down alternate and left mouse button, you can rotate your scene. Okay, so give that a go, get used to it. So the purpose of today's lesson, right, the first class, we are really focusing on trying to get comfortable in Maya. Do not be afraid of like the crazy amount of buttons and things that you have to press. Just be familiar with like how to move about in your scene, how to move things around. That's more than enough. Okay. So alternate left click, rotate. Alternate middle mouse, which is your scroll wheel. So of course you can scroll as well. If you scroll, it's zooming in. So alternate left, rotate. Alternate middle, pan. Alternate right click is to zoom. I don't really like the scroll wheel, right? Because it's very jerky and it's at fixed interval. But if you were to use the right click, right, you can zoom into the exact distance that you want. But for zooming, you see, you lose a lot in between. Sometimes this is too little and this is too much, right? So you want somewhere in between. So alternate right click is the best. Okay, so very simple. Alternate left, middle, right. Okay, so take the next like half a minute. Just mess around with the grid. There's nothing much to see, obviously. You can create a cube. You can just click on a cube in a polygon tab. Just like, wow! Okay, just look at it for me. Okay, after you're done with rotating, the first set of shortcut keys that we're gonna deal with is Q, W, E, R, T, Y. What's that? Where? Yes, QWERTY. Where's your QWERTY keys? Where's your QWERTY keys on your keyboard? Where's your, anybody? Where's your Q, W, E, R, T, Y on your keyboard? Yeah. It's in the top. Yeah, it's in the top row. Okay, so very easy, right? Q, W, E, R, T, Y. Okay, so we're just gonna learn Q, W, E, R. T, Y is for much later that we'll use it, or we'll never even explore it in this module actually. Okay, but if you want, you can go and look at what T, Y is. Anyway, Q, W, E, R is to activate the buttons in your toolbox. So Q is selection, W is move, rotate, scale. Q, W, E, R. So it goes nicely down the row or the column, right? So let's just try that. So Q, right? To me, Q is not just selection mode. It's also a quit tool. So if let's say you're in your tool, you're stuck inside the tool that you want to get out of, right? You always press the Q, okay, to go back to selection mode. So Q is basically to select cubes, alright? W is to move. So let's look at W for a while, shall we? And you see three colors. What are the three colors there? R? Okay, X, Y, Z. The colors? The colors? What is the colors of the arrow? RGB, red, green, blue, right? Very good. So, if you are familiar with your graph, remember many years ago, okay, not that many years, for you it's last year, right? For the year 2s, I'll say many years ago, you know. Because to them it's very far away. Okay? We've got this, okay, the days before your graphical days started that you can take. Okay, and if to scare you further, I don't know what's that. Let's what sine cosine. I don't know how to get it. Okay, anyway, you guys have learned X, Y so far, right? So X is horizontal, Y is vertical, yes. And we've got the positive X, the negative X, positive Y, negative Y, correct? So Some of you who are more quick in observing stuff, you'll go like y, x, y. Where's the z? You know, why can't you start from y, z? Yes, very good. So actually, they were reserving z for your tertiary, okay? Welcome to the module of graph making. So we've got our z and our z. Wait, they have a d? What? Yeah. So in 3D, right, we learn an extra axis which is the depth. So we learn horizontal, we learn vertical. It's a 2D plane.
We learned the depth.
Now we learn depth, okay? So we have positive z and we've got negative z, the front and back stuff. Right, so in Maya, they represent these three axes with the RGB spectrum. So we have red for X, green for Y, and blue for Z. And it will always be the same, okay? The RGB is always the same for X, Y, Z. What is RGB used for? In digital display, yes, yours? Television, yes, correct. So anything that is digital, anything that's in your screen, anything that uses light. So if you go back to your science lesson, the prism, you know, the rainbow, the nightmares of physics, science, whatever, okay? You got your rainbow, right? So RGB represents the primary colors in a light spectrum. What is CMYK?
For printing.
It's for printing, yes, correct. Cyan, and then what? Magenta. Y is? Why? Why do I have to learn this? What is Y? Yeah? Yellow. What's K? Key? Black. Yes, okay, your black. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so CMYK is for printing, and it's basically the CM. If I'm not wrong, the CMY is the primary colors, right? The K is for the intensity of colors. So it's meant for paints. How paints, the pigment, blends together. So it's definitely different from light. So that's why we use RGB and CMYK. So so in this case, in 3D, right, it's very important to know two things. One is the origin, and second is where's the front of your object. Okay, in your whole scene, right, if you anyhow rotate, you probably don't know where the front of the cube is anymore. And it's very important because if you were to import your models into a game engine, you want to make sure that your character is facing the correct direction. You might just say, just simply rotate lah, you know, what's the big deal? The big deal is that if you were to program your character to move around, right, you always have to remember that 180 degrees that is set. Okay, versus if you put everything in 0, 0, 0, no need to think about it anymore, right? So that's the idea, okay? You want things to be simple. Everything we do in industry, right, is really so complicated. So we want to make everything simple for people down the line. Right? So how do you know where the front is? Okay, let's look at origin first. Origin is the 000. 0 in X, 0 in Y, 0 in Z. The very center point of your world is right in the middle here. Okay, so you can see your grid, right? This part is the origin. And this is where you want the center of your character to be. Okay, so if you have the origin, it's very easy to do mirror. It means you only focus on modeling one side of your character and then you just mirror over. So you'll notice that if we can do things the easy way, we would. Okay, so a lot of artists, we make sure we save a lot of time. Most of the models are created in half, and then we'll just push over on the other side. Okay, so you need to make sure that it is nicely in the middle, so you kind of save a lot of effort in trying to mirror stuff. And Okay, let's talk about where's the front of the cube, right? I've already like gone everywhere. If you look at the small little guy here, this is what represents your world. And you want the Z to be facing you. Okay, this is once. You want the Z axis, right, to look at you. So this part of the cube is the front. You see that? The Z axis is facing you. The small guy, you're not looking at the what's that? The gizmo. Okay, so this is the front of your object. So in the case of our car, right, we want to determine where's the front of the car. So obviously it's the headlight, right? This part. So you want to make sure this part is facing the Z axis, positive Z axis. Okay, so the Z must face Z. Okay, so let's go on to moving our cube. So you can actually just click on the arrows to move it in the following axis. You can also click on the red RGB boxes to move it in 2 planes. Let's say X, Y, Z, Y, or ZX. So for beginner, I would highly recommend that you guys work on one axis at a time. If you want to position something, just slowly move it to that location. Okay, it's less complicated that way. If you were to click the center box, the transparent light blue box, it might feel like you're moving your box. Let's say I want to put my box at the end of the grid here, right, at the back. If you try to move, right, it's not possible, okay? And you notice your box is not like, it's not getting smaller also. If you move behind, it should get smaller, right? So what's really happening in the middle is that it's moving according to your camera view. So it's as though your camera view is like a piece of paper, you're just moving it like that. So you're not actually moving it front and back. Okay, so this is the worst thing to use for, especially for the start. If you don't know what you're doing, right, don't use the center, okay? Because you don't know if you're pushing it back or forth. And then when you look up from the top, like, oh no, it's actually like totally out of place. Okay, so if you can use the arrows, if you're a bit more, if you understand more, you can use the other colored boxes. Okay, so you can try and create some objects and just kind of place them around. Okay. Next one is the rotation. Once again, your 3 rotation axes are in 3 different colors. Okay, so you can click on the line and rotate. You can also rotate from the middle, the empty space, but again, I say it's very hard to control. Okay, so it's best if you just work from the lines. The light blue one is rotating according to camera again. Okay, so all these two, the other 2 axes is seriously very hard to use. Okay, so don't use the light blue one, don't use the center portion, just stick to your RGB. Okay, and you're good to go. The last one is scale. So I'm just going to go to a proper model that's still upright. So scale looks exactly the same as movement. So you can definitely use the box and you can tell how it rotates, how it scales up. You see that? So this is a very obvious example of how these boxes work. Okay. And for scale, right, use the center one if you need to scale proportionally. And most of the time we would use the center one if we want to do set dressing, things like that. We'll use the center one to scale. So we won't scale like this. Okay? You're gonna get a distorted character. Okay, so Q to quit all these gizmo. So QWER is your shortcut key. Now what about the other 2? These two, right? These two are selection modes, but it's different selection modes. For example, the first one is actually a rectangle selection mode. Besides just selecting things by clicking, right? You can draw a box around your selection and it's going to select whatever is in the box. The second one is a lasso selection. So you can actually like lasso your things. Okay. Oh, lasso. Yeah. Okay, the third one is a brush. So it's usually used for like complex things like, let's say I've got a lot of points here that I want to select, right? So the brush tool sometimes is perfect to kind of paint where you want to select. You can change the brush size, you know, and paint and things like that. So I won't go too deeply into the brush tool. Okay, so just focus on maybe the first and the second one. And yeah, but usually if you press Q, right, you're always going to the rectangle selection. Okay, so that is generally it for selection. Now the next step that we'll talk about is the different components in 3D. Are you writing down the shortcut key? Using your damn good memory is not going to help, okay, because it's going to add and compile, you know, so you're going to get more and more and more. Okay, so next one is the different parts of a 3D model. So we have vertex, edge, and face. 3 things, okay? So if you right click on, you need to select the model first, okay? If you right click, you can even right click outside of your model. It doesn't matter, but you need to select it. So this is what we call a marking menu. This menu is customizable once again, and this menu will change according to what is selected in your object, in your scene. So if you're in vertex mode, it's going to display vertex stuff. Or if you're using certain tools, it's going to change over here. Okay, so let's explore the first one, which is vertex. So vertex is basically the points in your model. Let's just go to the sphere. I think it's more visible. Okay, these are all the points in your model which you can move and distort, right? So you can see I move from the center, it looks great. But if you move to the side, whoa. That's why I say it's really best if you could just use the arrow for the start. Okay, so next one is edge. Edges is basically moving the lines. Okay. And face is to move the face. Simple, right? If you want to get out of this mode, just right click and choose object mode. And then you're out of it. One more thing that you can explore is something called multi. Multi is new and I think some of you might love it. It's basically the ability to select anything, okay? Vertex, edge, and face, depending on where you hover. So some people might like it, some people not so much, you know. So give it a go, see which one is your preference.